It's entertaining when you watch from this direction always to see what's going on behind all you folks. Oh yeah, welcome to week number 6 of The Story. Good to see all of you in person. Everybody doing okay? Good to see all of you on the other side of the screen. We hope you're doing well tonight. You ever wondered how in the world that you reach college kids with the gospel of Jesus Christ? How in the world do you help them move in their faith? Well, tonight is your lucky night, because we're going to talk about those types of things. We're excited to have a special guest with us, who I will introduce in just a moment. This is week number 6. As I have said, I am Rick Just, Senior Pastor here at Asbury Church, welcoming you in person. Bless your hearts. And you on the other side, and especially if you've never joined us before, we're glad that you can join us tonight as we hear about God and how He has worked in His great big redemptive story, and how He uses people like you and me, in spite of us, to accomplish so much of His tasks, so much of His work to reach others with Jesus. Well, we have had some incredible stories. Last week was Nancy Tanton, and how many of you were here for that? Excellent, yeah. And how many of you on the other side of the screen? Excellent. We're glad that you could join us as well. It was a wonderful time, as many of you have gone to worship in church with her before and maybe didn't know her story, and now you know her a little bit better. We have some of her materials in the office. If you're interested, you can check that out with us. We'd be glad to help you out with that. Well, tonight, I am blessed. We have a little bit of what we call nepotism going on in the life of the story. I am blessed to have my daughter-in-law, Mary Lou, and my daughter-in-law, Molly Just, with us. She is the campus minister as well as the director of discipleship at Southwestern College. She is married to our youngest son, Kyle, who happens to be here this evening, and so pray for him. But it's going to be a great time tonight. I'm going to invite Molly to come up. If you'd welcome her, we're going to have a good time, all right? Molly Just. Well, hello, Molly.
Hey, should turn on my mic.
There we go. Now, you and I don't normally meet like this.
No, we don't.
Oh, my. But what a hoot. When I was thinking about people who should be coming this evening or on nights like this, I thought, well, I've got to have Molly come. I mean, she's got a great story in the things that she's doing at Southwestern College, and how she got there, and what she's doing, and what she has yet, what God has in store for her ahead. And so here she is. I had the privilege of officiating their wedding back, gosh, how many years ago? 2012? 8 years ago.
8 years, yeah.
That was so much fun, because I got to tell you this. I only did it once. I only did this one time, and I'll never do it again, and you have to know the Princess Bride movie. You know the movie? Anybody? Princess Bride? Marriage. Marriage, it what brings us together. That's what I did. It was so much fun. Except for my dad, who didn't know. He didn't know we were doing that, and others who didn't know, and if you got to know the movie. But we had a good time. Plus, I had the privilege of being able to be with her when she was ordained, because I was your DS at the time.
You were. I was lucky that when I was ordained, they let you up there.
And it was amazing. It's a miracle. But before we get into all that kind of stuff, you're a Western Kansas girl.
I am.
Right? Why don't you tell these folks a little bit about where you grew up and, some of those things of good old farm life out in Western Kansas.
Yeah, so I grew up in Holcomb, Kansas, near Garden City area, for those of you who might know that. That's all I really knew. I grew up there my whole life, born and raised in Garden City, Holcomb area. My dad's a farmer, And that's a generational thing in our family, and on both sides, my mom and my dad's sides. And so my dad, we ended up moving to Holcomb and, built a house and lived out there for most of my life when my maternal grandparents ended up retiring, and then they later moved to Florida, and my dad took over the farm. So I grew up in a rural area with animals, and sometimes I tell people that and they don't believe me. It doesn't seem like me or something.
It does. It's hard to believe.
Yeah, but I can drive a tractor. I have a lot of skills, actually. Yeah, I can drive a tractor. I've never mowed the grass. My dad would hate that I'm telling you that right now, probably. But
I wasn't going to bring that up.
Somehow I made it. Everybody else mowed the grass but me.
It's like, how do you go through life on the farm without ever mowing the lawn?
I don't know.
How does that happen?
Lucky. Yeah. Mm-hmm. I didn't always love being outside, but I had to do outdoor things.
Well, she had another sister and a brother, so pass it on to them, right?
Yeah.
They can mow the lawn.
They did.
Yep. So you graduated from Holcomb High, and then went on to.
Yeah, so I went to Southwestern. So a lot of my story has been at the college in that kind of way. Went to Southwestern, and my connection to Southwestern was really interesting. I had never heard of the college before in Winfield, Kansas, but my youth pastor at the time, his wife, was an alumna of the college, and she was talking with me when I was looking at different colleges and trying to figure out where to go and what to do. And she said, hey, there's a discipleship program at Southwestern, the college that I went to, and they have a great education program. I was interested in looking into teaching at the time. And she said, I just think that you would really love it there. Like, it's a small community, it's very intentional, and she said, you should check it out. So I took her word for it, and ended up there and graduated in 2012, spent a lot of time a part of the campus ministry, doing different things, and now I work there, which is crazy to think about.
It is kind of ironic. Now she works there. But prior to her time, you talk about being involved with even in ministry while you're going to school. If we back up a little bit, your history is not with the United Methodist Church.
No.
Why don't you share a little bit of that, because it does play into your story.
Yes, I am not. I did not grow up a Methodist. That's really different than the space that I am in now. So I actually grew up in the Roman Catholic tradition, and my whole family on both sides are really faithful Roman Catholics. And so I grew up in the Catholic Church really my whole life up until the point I was about the age of 13 or 14, and was really faithful in going to worship and being involved in the church in different kinds of ways, going to catechism classes, all of that. And then, through a series of events, some different things happened just in my life and in my family, and our family ended up moving churches. We went to a non-denominational church around the time that I was 13, 14. And the way that we actually got there were lots of things going on in my home church, and I feel like I had a lot of questions about my faith. This is just the place that I found myself in at the time. I find myself extremely, incredibly grateful that I grew up in the Roman Catholic tradition and carry a lot of those pieces of formation with me, even to this day, for sure. But I found myself just at a certain time, in a certain place and context, where I had a lot of questions about my faith, and there were people around me who couldn't answer my questions at the time. And then, because I had a really good relationship with a friend from school, I started going to youth group with her at a church, a non-denominational church in town, and got really connected in that space with their youth group. And then, lots of people, there were just youth pastors and their families and other people in the church who just really poured into my life and the life of my friends. And that is where I had an awareness of God in my life for the whole of my life. I would say that Christ was with me, but it was when I was in middle school and then later in high school that I really owned my faith for myself and said, that's the testimonial part of my faith in that kind of way. I said, I want to follow Jesus when I was in the 8th grade and then was in a youth group. That really helped me grow over the course of time.
Yeah. we were talking last week with Nancy. Some of you would remember that, sometimes we tend to put God in a box or even the faith in the box by saying, well, if you can't tell me that exact time, then, well, maybe you have never placed your faith in Jesus. Well, God was always at work in a formation in your life through the Roman Catholic Church, moving you through the questions and so forth. And it, based on what you're just saying, is there came a time where, it really resonated and you go, yeah, I mean, that's what I believe.
Yeah.
That's what I believe. And so, here now you're, in your teen years, in the youth group, you're getting ready to go off to college, which you did. So you were involved in the faith. How did that happen in the college? A little bit more. Who were your mentors there? Who were those that poured into you while you were at school?
Yeah, so I went to Southwestern. Just like many freshmen, I work with tons of freshmen these days. Like many freshmen, I was not so sure. Like I went to Southwestern in my first semester. I was, I'm like, did I choose the right place? I don't know if I'm in the right place. But there were lots of people along the way that were really important in my journey at the start that stuck with me throughout my time in college. So Ashley Alley, who you have heard her name in some of the other conversations. I know Wendy talked about her. But Ashley Alley was a really important person in my life who mentored me in the faith. She was the director of the discipleship program that I was a part of when I was in college, and then later became the campus minister. Another common name you're going to hear is Steve Rankin, right? And Steve was only at Southwestern for a year while I was there. We crossed paths for a really short period of time. So I would actually say, Steve did pour into my life. I took a class with him called Judeo-Christian History that kind of set me on a different trajectory when I was in college. He's one of the ones who made me want to change my major and study religion. But Steve, I would say, has poured into my life at certain points along the way as time has gone on. He wasn't with me my whole time in college. So those are some of the main folks.
Well, if you've been listening the last few weeks when Wendy was here and a few other times, you've heard Steve's name brought up. Steve was the original, I would say, right, as far as the director of discipleship.
He's the OG. He started the program.
He started the program there at Southwestern College, and so he spent some time there, of course, developing that, and then pouring into Ashley Alley Crawford now, she's married, who then also poured into Molly. I had the connection with each one of them, and so it's interesting how our paths crossed in all of this, and now on this side to look back and go, and now she's my daughter-in-law. Go figure.
You got so lucky.
Yeah, she is so lucky. I mean, she wanted to spend about 30 minutes sharing about that giftedness, being so blessed in that sense, but I said, oh no, that's okay. But anyway, so some time there, involved in the program there as you were going through it, and then tell us about your calling then, because if you think about this is an interesting thing for me, because you coming from the background and tradition that you have, that was not something that a woman would be doing, and to go into ordained ministry. And yet, here you are, and the great support that your family has provided, which we'll talk about here after a bit. But talk about that calling a little bit.
Yeah, so I would say that was actually one piece of the puzzle when I was a part of the Roman Catholic Church that was really hard for me. So there were moments, my brother and sister are supposed to be coming here at some point. You could ask them, but there would be moments in my childhood where we would play church. So I'm the oldest, and my sister, and then my brother. But we would play church in our house, and from a very young age, I would pretend I was the priest, number one, and number two, I would serve communion at the time, which was like Cheez-Its and orange juice, right? That's what we had in our house. We didn't necessarily have bread and grape juice. So I don't know if I was a heretic, but I was like learning, I guess. But we would play church, and I would serve communion and pretend to be the priest. And then as I got older, I was running up against some different understandings of vocation in the place that I was. And so, I like to look back on that story in my childhood, though, because I think it tells us a lot about who God is and how God maybe formed something in us just from a really young age. And so when I was in youth group, I also went to a non-denominational church that also did wonderful church. In their practice, they did not ordain women in ministry. So I never was actually a part of a church that had women who were in positions of leadership in terms of like doing pastoral things. And I didn't really think a whole lot about it until I was interning with my youth group in Garden City, and my youth pastor, he said, "Hey, so, you're really gifted at some of this stuff." And he would say to me, "Have you ever thought about being a youth pastor?" And I was like, no, I've never really thought about it. I think it would be really cool with the time that I have to volunteer in the church. I could see myself doing that, but I think I just want to be a teacher and to work in the church. And so my youth pastor for a really long time would nudge me and would say things like, "Hey, you should think about being a youth pastor," which was funny, right? Because we were a part of a tradition where he didn't really think women could be youth pastors, I don't think. But he would say that to me, and then eventually later on, as we got to know each other and the time went on, he started just telling me stuff. He would be like, "You need to be a youth pastor. Wherever you go to school, you need to study something to do with helping you to get into that field." And so I really took that to heart, having people around me who were identifying gifts in me. And then, of course, ended up at Southwestern. Allie Crawford, I always call her Ashley Allie Crawford, was the first woman that I ever saw in ministry. And I didn't even know what I really thought about it. I was like, is she supposed to be doing that? I don't know. But Ashley was an incredible example, and between her and then my formation at Southwestern, I came to a place where I was like, maybe God is calling me to be a pastor, but I don't even know what that means, and I don't know what that looks like, and I don't even know where I would belong, kind of, yeah. So that's how I found my way into Methodism, and then I've always felt a call to teaching, which has been integral in my journey and my calling. That's a consistent thing that has been a part of my calling for a really long time. And then when I was in college, I love college students, and so that became a more particular piece of the calling, although I think I could do other things in the world and not have to work with college students, but I do like doing that. Well,
it's an interesting thing because there are some similarities with her and with Wendy Moeller-Seib in that they're both very smart. They're academic, they're thinkers, and so it's always good to rub up against these folks who have a few more brains than I do, because I'm kind of on that everyday Joe stuff. And then when we get together, we get to talk, and I'm sure we drive Mary Lou and Kyle crazy, because we'll go for. Yeah, Kyle's going.
We just put Kyle to sleep. That's what we look over and Kyle's.
Yeah, Kyle's back like this, and we're just going. We're just going on and on about all the stuff going on, and of course, she brings in that more academic piece, because she's the real thinker there, and I'm happy to have other people think for me. It doesn't hurt me at all, but it's good to have those conversations in there. But with both her and Wendy, to have that and bring that to the table with these kids, and to be able to help them think theologically, to be able to help them think about how does this apply to life and so forth. It makes all the difference in the world. Well, she's thinking through all this stuff while she's at school at Southwestern, and then next thing you know, sensing a call to ministry, and now all of a sudden there's this thing called, seminary.
Yeah.
And that. So tell us how that all came about and where you went and all that good stuff.
So I tried everything in my power to not go to seminary. I remember having multiple conversations with Ashley and just folks who were around me at the time at Southwestern, and saying what can I do? What master's program could I do that's not seminary? And I don't know why I was so against it. I think I just didn't have a picture. I didn't know anybody that went to seminary besides Ashley and Rick later on. But I didn't really have a feel for what seminary was, and so for some reason I think I was afraid of it. And I had a lot of my peers around me at the time. When I was in school, there were lots of my friends who were also studying religion, and we kind of were in the same place at the same time, considering next steps. And so I had tons of friends who were deciding to go, friends going to Duke, friends applying to Yale, so on and so forth, SMU. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I cannot imagine myself at SMU. I could maybe see myself at Duke, but like he's going there, and like, do we want to, am I going to impose on his time? One of my peers. And so you have all those thoughts, and so I just started visiting a few different seminaries. Kyle and I both worked with an organization in the summer called Project Transformation, and so we spent a lot of time in Dallas working with children who are considered to be underprivileged. And we loved that work, and so SMU actually was one of the seminaries that I first visited. And SMU has great professors. Billy Abraham is there, if you know him, in the Methodism world. Like Billy Abraham's at SMU, other great people. Bishop Jones was a huge proponent of that. And as much as I appreciated visiting SMU, I couldn't see myself there. And so I think just trying to figure things out was a part of my journey. And so eventually we went on a visit to Asbury Theological Seminary in Wilmore, Kentucky. And visiting Asbury was an experience where I feel like we stepped on the campus, and just said, this is the place. Like, we think that this is the place that God is calling us to. And there were a lot of reasons for that. Asbury is a great school, but the thing that I loved the most about it was the communal piece. They really care. They'll tell you this over and over again, that for them, it's all about connecting the head and the heart. And you would hear professors say over and over again that if everything to do with your faith is always in your head, eventually you'll dry up. And if everything to do with your faith only resides here in the heart space, eventually what will happen is you'll blow up, because everything's so emotional. You're looking for emotional experiences. But if you can have your head and your heart connected, then what happens is you grow up. And there was something about that where I'm even getting, giddy talking about that, thinking about that, because that is what Asbury was for me. Is it was a place of head and it was a place of heart, and watching how they came together, and just their understanding there about formation was really powerful and impactful.
Any time that, of course, we're excited at the time then, now, as they're getting ready to go to Asbury, they get married. We had a wedding out in Garden City, great wedding, and they moved into this little itty-bitty tiny house on the home place where her dad, did he grow up in that little house?
My mom did.
Your mom, that's right. Your mom grew up in this little itty-bitty house. They were there just for a few months and then moved to Kentucky. And, we were happy for them, but that's a long ways, but it gave us an opportunity to go there every once in a while. But it was no doubt for any of us back here to know that you both loved Wilmore, Kentucky. Mm-hmm. You both loved Asbury. Kyle did some work with underprivileged kids there. I can't remember the name of the school you were at, but he worked there, and just so many good things, so many great friends that you have and still have today.
Yeah.
And so, you're working on your Master of Divinity. She sees, I mentioned Dr. Robert Coleman before. He lives there, retired, but he meanders through every now and then, and I don't know if he ever did quite figure out if it was you or Kyle going to seminary.
Yeah, I don't know.
But you were there, 3 years?
2.
2 years. Mm-hmm. So she's, it's usually a 4. Well, it depends. 3 or 4 year program.
Sure.
So, and you have to do your Hebrew, you have to do your Greek, all this stuff. Everything's really good, and then something happens at Southwestern that she's going to tell you about.
Yeah. Yeah, so we loved Wilmore, loved Asbury. It was so funny because at least I was like nervous to go there, and you kind of build a life in the time that you're there. And so in my second year of seminary, like things are going great. I remember it was a day in March, and I came home from class, And I was in our house, and I was, cooking dinner or whatever, and I get a phone call, and it's from Allie, and she said, "Hey, I have something that I need to share with you." And I was like, "Okay, what is it?" And she said, "My job is coming open at Southwestern. I'm taking a job with the conference." And she said, "You should really think about applying for the director of discipleship position." And I was like, "What? No." I feel like, and I always would joke with Ashley when we were together. I would say, "Hey, if there's ever a job, at Southwestern, save it for me." And so she called me, and I was like, "Oh, we just love our life so much in Kentucky." And so Kyle and I had a long conversation about what do we do about this, and eventually just came to the place where he said, "Well, I just need to interview for the job, and if I don't get it, then we're really happy where we are, and if I do get it, then we'll be moving back to Kansas, and there's a lot to be happy about with that too." And so I interviewed for the job. I flew to Kansas. I sent all my CV in and all that kind of stuff, and they were looking for somebody with a master's, maybe not necessarily an MDiv, which also sounds like a Harry Potter degree. I don't know if there's any Harry Potter fans in the house, but every time people are like, "What's your master's in?" I'm like, "It's a Master of Divinity," and they look at me with a blank stare, and I was like, "It's like a Harry Potter degree," but I didn't even have my MDiv yet. I needed to finish my MDiv. But I applied, and then I was invited to interview for the position and came back to Kansas, did that. And I would say, hopefully in a really humble way, I feel like I interviewed for the position, and after I did that in person back on campus, I just was like, "Yep, this is what it's gonna be." Not that I had the job. I didn't want to be in the space where I got this job in the bag, but it was more a leading of the Holy Spirit. This is where I need to be, and this is where God, I think, is calling me to be. And if there's an agreement in the community, then we would feel good coming back. And so I flew back to Wilmore because I still had things to do there. I interviewed in May of that year, of 2014, I think, and went back to Wilmore. And I remember the day I was cooking stir fry, actually. Every time I eat stir fry, I think of this. Cooking stir fry, and got a call from Andy Shepard, who worked at the college, and he had taught me Latin, or I took a Latin class with him, but I feel like I learned everything but Latin. And so Andy Shepard, he was the dean, and he called me and he said, "Hey, Molly Komlofsky is who I was when I was in college." And he was like, "Hey, Molly Komlofsky," he's like, "I'm here to offer you a job." And I was like, "Really?" And so I was trying to be professional in everything that I did. He called me and was, telling me the details and the salary and all these things. And I remember being like, "Okay, I'm gonna have to think about it. When do you need to know?" And he was like, "Would you just say yes? I think that would make it easier on everyone." And so I was like, "Yes, I'm in to do it." And so that's how that happened, and we came back to Kansas.
Yeah. So here they're thinking 3 or 4 years in Wilmore. It's a beautiful place. It's kind of this little. It's just so hard to explain unless you've been there.
It's the holy city.
Yeah.
That's what we call it.
It's like the Christian Mecca, and so you go and you drop into this little rural area, and it's just quiet, and anyways. And so they're loving every minute of it, and next thing you know, of course, we'd heard that you had been offered or were applying, and so of course we were praying that she'd get it because they come back, and sure enough, well now, she's not done with school, and now has a full-time job and has to take Hebrew and other things. And so that's why I said, you remember what I said earlier? She's really smart. Yeah. Well, she pulled it off, and so you did. Was it 2 years, or did you do a full year of schooling and working full-time at the same time? Or how long was that?
Yeah, so the MDiv program at Asbury is about 4 years. It'll take somebody, you really have to be booking it to do 3. And so for some reason I was on the I'm booking it track when I first went. So that was nice because I had I had taken some extra hours and had some things under my belt. And at Asbury, they have a residential requirement. You have to be on campus for a certain amount of classes. And so because I had taken a few extra classes, I already had all of that done when I had the residential part done when the Southwestern thing happened. So that actually enabled me to go and to work at SC and then to spread my MDiv program out a little bit so I wasn't a full-time student and a full-time working in campus ministry person. So I did that, yeah, and then I still finished the degree in 4 years, but it was a pretty disciplined 4 years for sure. Like I would work at the college as a normal, in a normal 8-hour-ish kind of a day. And then really in the morning time, I would wake up and do homework, and then I would pretty much come home, cook dinner, because I love cooking, and that's like relaxing to me, cook dinner, and then do homework in the evening, and then maybe catch a show or something afterwards with Kyle. But that's how our life was for a couple of years. But we were really grateful. It worked out well, the discipline of that did. Taking Hebrew, I took Hebrew in the summertime. Online. My professor actually was amazing. Jason Jackson was his name, and he was a wonderful online teacher. And I pretty much for a summer just studied Hebrew for like 6 hours a day for 8 weeks or something.
That's like learning how to spit for 6 hours a day. I mean, it's that kind of...
It kind of is, yeah.
So,
yeah.
But I just think about it. I took Greek, several years of Greek, but I didn't have to take Hebrew at the seminary I was at, and in a way I'm pretty happy about that. But then when I knew she had to do that, I thought, oh, so just to pray her through that, and others who do that, oh my goodness. But made it through, and Kyle was at home and doing his thing, and they both actually like to cook. Just a little side note. And just a little, we're not doing the story with Kyle, but I'm going to tell one real quickly. Back when we were at Leota, he did a cooking class. Well, he liked to cook at home, and so he made a bundt cake for the county fair, right? He wins grand champion, okay? So if you know anything about premium sales at a county fair, that is money that just goes purely to the 4-H student. It's, if it's livestock, it's a premium for the livestock, and then whatever you sell it for. $600 for the bundt cake. I said you should have made 2. But anyway, so he likes to cook. He likes biscuits and gravy, and then she loves to cook. She's a very good cook, and so we if we get invited over there, we don't mind eating their food at all. It's good stuff. Right, sister and brother back there? By the way, there's Mallory and Brent, so they just pulled in. So
I told them they were just down at our house a couple days ago, and I said, I just made, I think, the best potatoes you'll ever eat in your life. Can you confirm? Were they delicious? Yeah.
Here's your $10, buddy.
Yeah.
So anyway, so she's now back. We helped you move back, right? Did we help him move back? Yeah, we did. Yeah, and your folks there and all that helped you move back. And then we, of course, had to go back for your graduation there, back at Asbury and so forth. But now you're back in Kansas. You're working at Southwestern, and there's been, quite a bit of this up and down since 2014 or whenever you started over there. But what is let's start with the discipleship program. What is that? How do you see that helping the kids? What are some victories that you've seen in that? And help them understand what that program is.
Yeah, so the discipleship program was started by Steve Rankin there, and it fits within, I'm going to talk about a couple of different parts of it. So started in 1998, I believe, and it was a part of, it has become a part of the service learning world at the college. I don't know if you've maybe heard that before. But we have 3 teams at the college that are considered to be under the umbrella of service learning. And so the idea with service learning is that when we engage with the world in a civic kind of way, the world can be changed when a leader plus followers can equal positive change. So we talk a lot about servant leadership at the college and what all that means, and service learning is a really big part of that. And so the discipleship program, the leadership program already existed. It's just a scholarship program that is amazing. It's directed by Cheryl Rood is the one who started that, and then Bray Wood directs the program now. And they learn all about what it means to be a servant leader. And so the discipleship program came in a little bit later, kind of into that sort of a space where when it originally began, Steve Rankin, the vision for it was that students college students would come together and go through a disciple Bible study together. And then the program morphed over the course of time. It started there with Steve, and he directed it for a little bit, but Steve also was the campus minister and the professor of religion. And so Ashley Alley Crawford was hired on to be the first, well, not the first. There were maybe one person before her, but she was the one who kind of formed the program into what it is today. And she was one of the first full-time directors of the program. And so how the program evolved is that it's a scholarship program similar to the leadership team, and students can actually receive a scholarship to be on the discipleship team at Southwestern. And what that means is that when you come in, the group that you're a part of is the discipleship team. And so the discipleship team has looked similar now for quite a few years. It's made up right now currently of a team of about 40 students, and it's one of the most diverse teams that you could be a part of on our campus. I probably should count again, but last year, when I was doing all my statistical counting or whatever, the discipleship team of 40 people had folks from 7 countries represented. So a very diverse team with students from all across the world and from across the state and other places. And so the students come together, and I like to talk about the discipleship team in regards to the big group. So the big group engages in different type of ministry opportunities together. This year, students have really focused on helping to serve our chapel program and to exercise their gifts in that kind of space. Like, we try to equip students to serve within their giftings. And then really the hub of the experience, though, is that students are broken up into covenant groups that are based on when they come into college. So we have like a first-year team, a second-year team, and it mainly follows, the breakdown of freshman, sophomore, junior, senior, but not always. Like, sometimes we have juniors come in and they're on the first-year team. But the students meet in covenant groups for 2 hours a week, and they are with the same group, for better or for worse. They're with the same group for the whole time that they're in college. And we have a curriculum that builds on itself. So the first year, all the covenant groups have a pastor with them. So or a mentor. I'm always the pastor with the first-year team, and then we have other really wonderful, the program wouldn't happen without these people, but other pastors and mentors from the community who give freely of their time to mentor these students for 3 years, normally through their sophomore and senior year. And they meet with them. And so in the first year, we go over the Bible together, still kind of follow the structure of disciple Bible study, going over the Old Testament and the New Testament, just to kind of get everybody on a common ground. And we share testimonies together. That's one of the important things we do in the first year. We talk about spiritual gifts and vocation, all those kinds of things. And then as time goes on, the curriculum is focused on different things. The second year is focused on spiritual disciplines and inviting students into practicing those. The third year is all about leadership, and so the students the whole program is run by the students. I tell the students, I'm like, yeah, you guys most of the time tell me what to do. Like, sometimes I have to come in and do some things, but it's whatever their ideas are, whatever their gifts are, and how they want to enact them in the program is what happens. So the third year is all about leadership, and then the fourth year is all about legacy. And so we have a lot of conversations about, okay, you've been here now for 3 years. What have you learned along the way? And what kind of legacy would you like to leave here at the college as you prepare to go into the world and do something different? And so we have a lot of conversations about what does it mean to leave a legacy? Do you get to decide your legacy, or do other people decide that for you? And it's just a really precious program. It is one of the things that was impactful in my life and Kyle's life. This is how we met. Yeah, I always am
If you didn't hear what she said, that's how they met.
That's how we met. I am always like, should people date when they're in the same covenant group? We did, and we made it, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes the students date, and then it's like a disaster, and you're like, oh no, why did they date? Yeah, but it's a beautiful program, so I'm grateful to direct it.
Tell us about, so let's say the first-year students, whether they're freshmen or they're just coming in their first year, obviously not everybody's on the same level or same spot on the faith journey. I mean, they're not on that. So how do you handle that? Or what are they, do they feel like they've got to know it all before they can get here? Or what? I mean, how does that all work with regards to those dynamics?
Yeah, there are a lot of dynamics. So the program is also ecumenical. So we have people coming from all sorts of different traditions to denominations. Sometimes we have students who join the discipleship team and they never have been to church really in their life. And this is the place they connect. So the way we handle that is with a lot of gentleness. Like, this is a huge value of being on the team. And we talk a lot about what does it mean to be self-aware and what does it mean to have an awareness of others. Because sometimes you can be in a small group where somebody thinks they know everything, right? And everybody else in the group doesn't know everything. Or sometimes you have the opposite of that. You have someone who's like, I'm never going to be as good as, this person over here. And so working on the skills of, okay, let's have some awareness here about yourself. Like, who are you? What is your identity? We talk a lot about identity and how at the end of the day, we really believe in a common identity, that we're all beloved children of God. And this is a good starting place because it means we're just all on the same playing field, right? We're a beloved child of God. That is our primary vocation in the world. And then our secondary vocation is really fun because we get to figure out what our gifts are, and then we get to use them, and we get to celebrate the people who are beside us that are also using their gifts in the world. So it's a lot of work, and sometimes it is wonderful and full of a lot of joy, and at other times it's like being in a real family. And like, this person, I have students all the time that come into my office and are like, I just don't think like I can deal with that person anymore. And I'm like, well, you're only a freshman, so you have 3 more years with this person. And they're like, they don't like that answer. But this is real life, right? This is what being in a community and being a part of a church is like. And we come to the space where we say, hey, if you want to be invested in, what you find when you invest yourself in a community is that you yourself are also invested in. And that takes some vulnerability. So we work with all those pieces. Yeah.
Yeah, and those dynamics are difficult. Just the whole thing of being self-aware, of being a person who is willing to listen, being a person who doesn't have all the answers, and all that goes into that. I mean, for you know my personality. Now, she could tell you my personality. You can ask her if you want, but I mean, so usually you don't have to guess after too long where I stand on things. But I've also learned over the years that's not always the best way to begin the first conversation. We need to move into that. Nathan and I were talking about that this afternoon even. Just how is it that we listen to people? How is it that if you have these people that are coming in that have really no clue about this Jesus we're talking about, and we're going to go throw our weight around because we either think we know it all, or we're going to tell them, and this is how you do it. That's a defeat. I mean, it's not going to be helpful at all. Right. Now, what do you do when you have someone who comes in and is the know-it-all and is consuming that life of that group? How do you handle that?
Yeah. Oh, how do I handle that? I try to do a lot of things to equip the group to handle that, because at the end of the day, I don't want the group focused on me, right? Like, I'm trying to equip students and leaders to be in the world, to be human beings in the world and disciples of Jesus in the world. So there are some ways that I seek to direct things. I think that there are definite skills and facilitation that I use practically to be able to do that. But I also try to create spaces where everybody has a voice. So in our first year team, in our second semester, we always share testimonies. It's a really big part of what we do, and it's cool because the freshmen then have been together, or the first year team, they've been together for a semester, so they kind of know each other, they know their space, they've been at the college at least for a semester and kind of get the vibe of how their life is there. And then in the second semester, we have, it's part of an assignment they have to do, but I think they enjoy it. But they actually have to write out their testimony. They have to type it as a paper and then turn it in to me. And then everybody has done that, and then the students are invited to share. And I always say, you are invited to share as little or as much as you want, but what we are challenging you to do is to share. And like, that might be easy for some of you, and it might be difficult for some of you too, but everybody, again, kind of has the same opportunity and is on the same playing field. And what I find in those moments is that it's always the work of the Holy Spirit. Like, we just give all of the credit in all the moments to the work and the power of the Spirit, but it always happens that the first person, nobody wants to go first, right? When it's time to share testimonies. It's like, okay, we're going to sign up to share testimonies for our covenant group. Like, who wants to go first? And everybody's like, not me. And what always happens is that the person, one of the people that you might least expect, signs up to be the first one. Yeah. And it might be the one who has like been the most quiet in the group for a long time. And all of a sudden, when they share their testimony at Covenant Group, they share with such vulnerability that it creates a hospitable space for everybody else to share. And so I find in those moments that it's not normally my ones who talk a lot or can overtake the group that are the first ones to volunteer to share in that kind of a way. But it's the quieter person that like sets the scene or the stage for some of that. So
yeah. Well, so really what you should do is give the assignment to all these people here tonight for that very thing. Correct?
Yeah.
Yeah. So then your assignment would be, okay, we want you to write out your testimony, and then you'll turn that in, and we can bring Molly back, and she can go ahead and say, okay, who'd like to be first? And we go from there. And what it does is it moves us out of a comfort zone, yes, but it also helps us to realize, oh, wow, God did a work in me that I didn't realize, and I've written that down, and I've seen that, and that's part of why we're doing even the story here, as you've all seen in the various testimonies that have been shared, how God is at work. So hang on to that thought. We may have an assignment for you, but before it's all said and done.
And I will say, we also have, so the testimony part is really cool because for students in their senior year in the discipleship program, they write their testimony again, and they add to it. They add all of the ways that God has worked, and then they share with each other again. And I just have heard, the feedback, because I'm not there for that. Like, they have another covenant group pastor or mentor that's with them at that time. But the feedback that I hear from every group is phenomenal, right? Like, there are tears because like these people have been walking with you for 4 years, and they've seen these things happen in your life. So that's another thing to be mindful of too, is like God is always adding to our testimony. So it's a good practice to write your testimony and then continue writing it over the course of time.
Well, and what's interesting also is, and this is a story that I'll tell on Kyle, but as we think back to when you two were back in college, and during chapel there would be those times of testimonies. Mm-hmm. It just so happens that one day I listened to chapel, and Kyle is giving a testimony that day. Well, the thing is, when you give a testimony, you may tell people out there some things that Dad and Mom don't know about. And so, do you remember that? And I'm going, dang, I'm glad I didn't know that. On the other hand, I'm glad I did know some other things that happened. And then I'm also very glad that he met Molly, who kept him out of a lot of trouble that would have been a real disaster should he gone down the road he was going. So
we've been good for each other.
Yeah, they'll have to. There's more to that story, but it's just the way God works in all these things, even in the testimonies there, and to hear that and go, okay, that makes some sense. Oh, well, I almost wish I wouldn't have heard that. Okay, switch gears now. Okay, so that's the discipleship piece, if you will. And this year, although you've been involved with this before, you are also the campus minister.
Yep.
So what does that mean, and how does that add to your plate, or actually tie into it, or does it complement, or whatever?
Yep. So I'm definitely learning what it means to be a campus minister. I am not a pro. But it does. So I was asked to step into the role of campus minister in January of last year. So it almost has been a year, which is kind of crazy to think about. And one of the main things that the college asked me to work on in the role of campus ministry or to just oversee in my time is our chapel program at the college. And when I was a student at Southwestern, I was in a position called the chapel student administrator. So I had worked with the chapel program quite a bit in my junior, my senior year in particular at Southwestern. And then, in this role, a huge part of what I do is I oversee our weekly chapel program and equip students to lead and work with wonderful colleagues to plan different elements of worship for college students. Every Wednesday at 11 a.m. is when our chapel is. And so that has been a huge part of what I do in the role of campus ministry, just practically, is planning worship for our campus. And not just for students, but for faculty and staff too. We have many faculty and staff people that will come to chapel. And so I'm in charge of that. But really I see my role as campus minister, the more that I'm serving in the role and learning about it, the more I see what I am to do as something that is very pastoral, and especially during this time, just with COVID and a whole host of other things that are going on in the world. I find that people just need a pastor. People need to have a conversation with you in the hallway. People need to come to your office for spiritual direction. People need you to, drop something by their porch, whether it be flowers or a card or something. And so I find myself working actually in a lot of ways that are behind the scenes. I'm not even really sure that, tons of people at the college could be like, Molly just does this, as a part of her role as campus minister. But there's a whole lot of conversations I have just behind the scenes with people, or people will email me and tell me things, and to just have somebody to respond to you, I think is a really important role of what I do. And so I minister to students for sure, but I also minister to the larger community.
Yeah, and the thing about the chapel is that it is open to anyone. So, if any of us wanted to go on chapel day, which is Wednesdays, down at Southwestern, we could go. I've preached there a couple times, and it's always been a wonderful time there. And of course, this year with COVID, at least while the weather allowed you have always been outside. Yeah. Just outside outside the steps and out to the west there. And you're probably not still outside, or were you? What's today? You were today probably, or not?
We weren't today, just because the weather's so unpredictable. Yeah. But we've been outside, so that's been another. Like all of us, we've been challenged to think in new ways about ministry in the midst of a global pandemic. Of course, we have. So one of the things that we did in the summertime, we had to figure out. We share tons of spaces on our campus, and then with COVID happening and students having to be spread out in classrooms, we started to have to use our auditoriums as classrooms for students for really big classes. So all of a sudden we found ourselves in a place when the college, when they were making those decisions in the summertime, we were like, oh man, where is chapel gonna happen? Because for us, you all know, if you've been a part of a church for any period of time, it takes a good amount of time to set things up, to sound check with your musicians and speakers, to do all of that. And we normally would do that on a Tuesday night rehearsal in one of our auditoriums at the college before COVID. And then with classes happening all day in the auditoriums, we just were like, this is not going to work very well for us, for chapel to be in its normal space. And so I work with somebody who is a genius, Martin Rude, and he just makes anything happen. And in the summer, I said, we were talking in kind of like a chapel planning meeting, and I just said, I think we're going to have to be outside for chapel. That is how it's going to have to be. It makes the most sense. It seems the most hospitable, to our college. It seems like where we fit right now. And so Martin built a trailer, and it was perfect because we needed to store all of our sound equipment and all of that kind of stuff outside in the space. We call it the Grove, so chapel in the Grove, but it's between these two rows of trees, and so we hung string lights and had this really cool trailer. And I would say our chapel attendance just was blown out of the water. There was a day we ran out of chairs. The school actually didn't have enough chairs for students to come to chapel, and I didn't even notice.
We have that problem most every Sunday.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah.
I was like running around, like I didn't even notice until our speaker was like, yeah, there's no more chairs. Like people are sitting on the ground and it's fine. Like they're college students, it's fine.
That's awesome. I mean, when you drive up there and you look and see between that grove of trees, and that's where they have chapel, it's like, oh, that's nice. So you have that campus minister piece, and so, excuse me. You got that, the pastoral piece that you talk about, and, where people just drop in your office, and some days it's good with the things they bring you, and some days they're complaining and carrying on, and some days you want to pull out your hair, and I mean, it's just the way it goes, but, she is what's called appointed beyond the local church. And so she is an ordained elder within the United Methodist Church, but is not appointed to a local church. She's appointed beyond that, and that's where her calling is. And I think, we've tried to stress, at least with those, whether they're on the board of ordained ministry or the bishop or anyone, that there is a calling, and not everyone is called into the local church. We need people like Molly and Wendy and others, Ashley and those, to do what they do to reach others for Christ. And so it's a huge, it's very, very important for us to have these people, the right people in place, and I believe the right person's in place at Southwestern. Now, you have a heart for spiritual direction.
I do.
Formation, direction. I think you bring in the tradition from the Roman Catholic Church in that more liturgical piece, the reflective, all those types of things. You are currently in a program of, well, what is it? And tell us about that a little bit, because I'd even like to know some more about it. So
Yeah. So I'm currently in a continuing education program to be certified as a spiritual director, the Ministry of Spiritual Direction. And I felt called to this for a long time. The Ministry of Spiritual Direction is sacred listening. And so the idea is that you have different directees that you meet with, and you're there to be a listener and to listen. The Holy Spirit is the true guide, the true director in the Ministry of Spiritual Direction. And then what you're doing together, right, is you're listening and you're journeying and you're companioning, you're walking alongside each other, and you're listening to the Holy Spirit together. So that's what the ministry, just very shortly, of spiritual direction is. I felt called to that for quite a long time. I actually was interested in doing a program in 2016, right after I graduated seminary, and I remember telling Kyle about it. I'm like, hey, I think I want to do this. And he was like, you just graduated? Like, are you serious? You want to do like something else? And I was like, okay, you're probably right. So put that off for a while. And then, a couple of years ago now, I guess it would have been maybe a year and a half ago, I really started feeling that calling again to be trained as a director, and started looking at programs really all across the country, and found that there was a program in Atchison, Kansas. It was a residential program, which is something I really wanted. You have to go there. We would go once a month to be trained by some of the sisters, Benedictine sisters at Mount St. Scholastica, a monastery that's up in Atchison. And so it was a monthly thing, and we do reading and have some other requirements that are a part of the program along the way. But I went to visit the monastery a couple of years ago, a year and a half ago now, and when I visited and talked with some of the sisters who direct the program, I was like, I think that this might be a really good fit. And so that's what I'm currently doing, is being trained in the ministry of spiritual direction.
Yeah, and so she gives me a book at Christmas time, right? And do you remember what it was? I mean,
was it Esther DeWall?
What's that?
Was it Esther DeWall?
It was the one about from the Benedictines.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
And it's like, oh man, I've got to really slow down and I've got to really take this thing in. I mean, I like cruising through. There is no way you can cruise through some of those
things.
There's
no cruising through, yeah.
No, and you told me ahead of time. I don't know that I've ever finished it yet, to be honest with you. I mean, I've been in and out of that book, but that's the reflective part that Molly brings, and I think it's a real gifting that she brings. And so, not everybody can do that. That wouldn't be my main thing, but I do like to do that from time to time. In fact, I've been told by people you should do that more often. But just for her to be doing that, and it's how long yet? Another year or two before you finish that?
Yeah, so I'm in my second year. It's a 3-year program, and Yeah, that's where I am.
3-year program so then she can, go be about the helping others in spiritual direction. I know Susan has been involved in some of that where she goes and she calls it spiritual direction. There's someone who helps oversee some of that. One time our staff went to Eureka and had a person lead us through a day of spiritual direction. And it's good just to slow down, let the Holy Spirit speak and so forth. And we need that, especially at a time when it's so chaotic anyways and so forth. But so these are all these things that are happening in the life of a young person like Molly Just, and who's making a difference in the lives of college kids and making a difference in the lives of her peers, her colleagues. She is well known throughout the conference, well known throughout some of our great leadership within Methodism at Asbury, Jessica LaGrone, and some of these folks, J.D. Walt. They've had her write some things before, so, we all can say, hey, we know Molly Just. But she brings so many good things to the table, not to mention she brings some great things to our family, which we really appreciate. Mary Lou and I are blessed to have both Kyle and Molly. We're blessed to have all 3 sons and their daughter and their wives, their wives that are such blessings to each of us, all strong in their faith, and we're grateful. We never take that for granted. But if you have any questions, are there any questions, Sarah? Anybody on Facebook out there have a question real quick, or some of you right here real quick that maybe you might happen to have? We have a microphone right there. We want to just make sure, in case you have something, we want to allow a little bit of time real quick for that, if anybody has anything. See how quiet they get?
Hey, educational psychology says you need 10 seconds sometimes to come up with something in your brain, so 10 seconds is a long time if you actually count to 10.
It is. And for me, it's like 1 second. Personality profiles, all that stuff. And
I tell my students this in classes. I'm like, we're going to give it 10 seconds. And they're like, is it over yet? Are we ready now?
Sarah, anybody? They all pretty quiet? Okay, yeah, Connie, jump up there to that microphone.
I was just wondering, was it Asbury Seminary that had the revival, or
Yeah.
Is that still something that affects the camp or affects the seminary?
Yeah, so Asbury Seminary and then Asbury University, or as it used to be Asbury College, is across the street. And it was Asbury College that had the revival that you are thinking about. I don't remember when that was.
In the 70s.
The 70s?
It was in the 70s, mid-70s.
Yeah, so it's a huge part of their history. They still talk about it. I think they actually still kind of ride the wave, actually, of that revival over at the university, and then it also impacts the seminary. I had a lot of professors who were wonderful when I was at the seminary who had been at Asbury College when the revival happened, and so they would talk about it a lot, like in our classes and our time together. Yeah.
Dr. Coleman, who I referenced, wrote a book called One Divine Moment. If you want to read about that revival, it's incredible what happened at that time. And the media was different back then, and just were there for weeks and weeks covering it.
Yeah.
Yep. Anything else? By the way, that's Mallory, that's Brent. Brent lives in Kingman. Mallory lives in Cheney, and we're glad to have both you here tonight. So I don't know if you knew they were coming, but maybe you did right beforehand or something.
Right before, yeah.
So it's good that you all came out tonight. So anyways, we appreciate you, Molly, coming, and that gives you a little insight into what's going on and how our kids are being reached. You know, just because they call it a Christian college doesn't mean it's a Christian college, all right? And so we need people like her to be there and actually to live the life of Jesus, help be the light and the salt for those, and to help them along the way as they move through those times in their journey of faith. Some of them are starting way back here, some are a little ways along, but we need people like her. So thank you for coming. I want to lift her up in prayer, and then I'm going to introduce our next speaker here shortly. So join me in prayer, if you will, for Molly. Lord, we thank you for the time tonight. We thank you for the work that you've been doing through Molly all these years and have been preparing her for moments such as these. We thank you for her story and for how we can be a part of that story, and how, Lord, that you're working through her there with those kids not such kids, I guess, the youth, the young adults there at Southwestern College, and then just all the other things that she's a part of as well. Bless her and Kyle as they both seek to minister in your name, and we pray your blessing on them as they continue to serve you. We give you thanks, we give you praise in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
Let's thank her for coming. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, here we go next week as Nathan makes his way over there. Okay, nepotism number 2. Todd just, and we tried to avoid this, to have back-to-back Justs, but the way the schedule works, it's the way it is. Todd is the executive pastor, worship pastor of Bennington Bible Church, and I was not really wanting to have both of them in the same 8 weeks, but the stories are just really incredible for you to hear, and I do want you to hear them, and he's going to bring a good word next week. We're excited about that. Hope he brings his wife, Melissa. We hope that'll happen. And Kyle, we're glad you're here tonight with Molly, and so we're excited about that. And then we'll have another special guest a week after that. So good stuff, right? Good stuff. Well, we thank you so much for coming. We pray God's safety on all of you. You on the other side of the screen, we're thankful that you could join us tonight. Pray God's blessing on all of you. Go in peace. Amen and amen. Still the best video in town.